right, hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRACnow.com, on our Facebook and our YouTube page, and of course on WRAC Plus, our new smart TV app. Another edition of 8Sports Nightcap is here, and we got another great show for you. We've brought in somebody special. I think a lot of people from around the Richmond area will know this name. You see on the bottom of your screens that a former 8Sports director is joining the show. And it's none other than the man himself, Chip Tarkenton. Chip, thanks so much for coming back into the station and over here on Auburn Place and sitting down with me.
Well, it's great to be part of the Nightcap. I don't think I've ever been on any kind of Nightcap, so this is kind of cool. I like it, and appreciate you inviting me. It's always fun to come back to the building.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we were kind of talking about it earlier. 23 years you spent here at WRAC, started in '88, finished in 2011.
Yeah.
A lot of things change in that time period, from technology to sports in general as well. I'm sure that you experienced that for sure, right?
Yeah, well, you walk in this room. This was master control when we moved in here back in the early 90s. And you walk around, you look around, you go, it's nothing like what it used to look like. But nothing in television is. It's all changed. And it's fun to see how it's changed over the years. It always changes.
Yeah, now they got us doing these podcasts. We got this nice podcast studio we have in here now. And we do a lot of different shows. Obviously, we talked earlier, Matty D's got his fishing show. And now the producers getting on it. They have a movie recap show. There's entertainment shows. This studio gets pretty busy, so it's been different to say the least, adding this within the past year. So even the past year, so much has changed here as well.
Well, that's the beauty of television and the beauty of the media now. There's so many different ways that you can get what you need. The old days, you had to sit in front of the TV and watch everything. Now you don't. You can do everything else. And your generation, as opposed to mine, good gracious, it's totally different. And, you know, I've got two sons, and they're on a different planet of what they can do and what they know than I do. But it's fun because I'm learning all this stuff. I'm not great at it, but that's all right.
Oh, come on. You spent 23 years here, and, you know, when I asked you to come on, and you agreed to. The first thing I thought was, I got to find some old clips of Chip. So let's go ahead and throw these up.
Let's hope they're the good ones.
Yeah, you know, it's just a little montage of some of the things you did during your 23 years here.
Great,
if
Rick
you could kind of
Mast.
just, you know, do you have any favorite memories of working here at Channel 8?
I could go on forever. That's a great live show that we did down at South Park Mall with Governor Allen at that time, and Mark Mosley was a kicker for the Redskins at that time. Of course, that's Dale Earnhardt, and we lucked into some Dale Earnhardt things over the years. In fact, we were the last people to interview him on pit road when he won the Daytona 500.
Really?
We purposely did that because when Dale got to the end, I wanted to make sure that we could just sit down here on pit road. We're going to just, you know, we're not going to rush you. And he said, all right, that'll be great. And so we got maybe the greatest interview in history, and he was sensational. And from that point on, he always took care of us. And then when Rick Stose came and joined us over here, that's when Dale Jr. was starting, and he got connected with their group. And so we always had the Earnhardts, and they were sensational to us. I see the Virginia Tech thing that you got popping up.
Small promos.
We used to do live shows before some of those games, and it was amazing how many people we could get. We were really lucky over the years. But I've stayed in touch with a lot of these folks, and that's been you're talking about a great deal of, oh my gosh, there's a picture of Bernier. Bernier, oh my gosh, the legend. We were just here with him.
Yep, you were here for his retirement party a few weeks ago. That was a telethon you
We
hosted.
did the Jerry Lewis MDA telethon for years and years and years, and we always finished that. I'd do cartwheels at the end, and that was comical to say the least because they were not very pretty, but we did them. And you'd be surprised how many folks would call in and say, if you do cartwheels, we'll give them more money. And that was the idea, is to raise money for MDA. And it was a real honor.
So you were just cartwheeling all throughout the
cartwheeling at the end of the show. We had to get to the number. It had to be last year's number. And I always knew that we were probably going to beat it early, but it was really neat to be a part of that. And I loved it. And some of those young people that did not make it, it's still tough. I still see some of their parents out and about, and you think of that part of it. And that was the sad part. And it was hard to know these young people passed. But we think we did good
Oh, absolutely.
in trying to help. And that's Carol Meekins right there. Carol Meekins had a great interview thing that she sent for John's retirement, and Carol I stay in touch with. So that's y'all found some pretty neat clips to put up.
Yeah.
And, I can tell all kind of stories. I can go all day.
Yeah, I think I see all these different sets. Obviously, this is at South Park, but
Yeah.
how many sets do you think you went through over 23? Because that looking at that, and then seeing what we do every night on the
Totally
the 11
different.
o'clock. Yeah.
We probably went through 5 or 6 sets. The one in Petersburg is when I arrived in '88, where you had to broadcast your newscast where your city of license was. The city of license was Petersburg. That's a story in itself, how the station came to be, because somebody was smart enough to say, I'll just make it in Petersburg instead of Richmond. They had a bunch of folks trying to get the ABC.
Yeah.
And that's how it happened. It moved to Petersburg. So that set kind of came up here for a little bit, but not much. And then, we had the
How
two
long were you in
sets.
Petersburg for? Sorry to interrupt.
We were in Petersburg, '88 to '91, maybe. It was April of '91 or '92 that we moved into this building, because it took a while to build it. But this was a show place, and it still is. It's still a gorgeous facility.
Yeah, I've
And
been
it's
impressed with it.
Wonderful. And to have 2 studios. A lot of places don't have 2 studios. We had 2 separate studios. You could be doing 2 things at one time. So it was way advanced from what really anywhere else I'd been.
What had you done before you came here to WRAC? I know you spent some time on the sidelines with Brent Musburger and some other things.
I had quite a career, and very, very fortunate. So my first job was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the guy that I went to work for there was also the first person not only to hire me to work in local television, but he got me my first gig in broadcasting games. So this year will be 36 straight years of broadcasting college football.
Wow.
And it's 25, I think, of basketball. I think that's the number. But he started me for both of those. And so that was wonderful. I was there a year, moved with the company to Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
And went from the weekend guy to the weekday guy. Loved Birmingham too. Was there for a year, moved to Asheville, North Carolina. And the news director that hired me a month later was fired. Last one in usually becomes the next one out.
Yeah.
So I started looking pretty quickly for another position, and fortunately found this. I was there about a year there as well before I came here. And I don't know, something about Richmond. I fell in love with it. And my wife and I got married not long after I'd been here. She was working for the United States Senate in D.C. So that was the closest we could get together before we got married. And we just fell in love with Richmond, and it's been a wonderful place. Both my boys grew up here, and so it's home. It just has always been home.
What station were you at in Birmingham? I worked in Huntsville, Alabama before I came here.
Yeah, you worked with my buddy Greg Screws, one of my best friends.
Yeah.
We got Greg to come up here and work for some years, and Greg and I have been close since I was in Birmingham. I was at BMG. They did not have a newscast.
Oh,
if
really?
you can imagine that. We were a startup newscast, and I was the first hire. It was crazy. As all these folks started coming, I was hired before the news director showed up.
Oh, my goodness.
It was pandemonium almost, but it was a great experience to be in Birmingham. And at the time, I was really, really lucky. As you know, in Alabama, the only 2 things that matter, and that's Auburn and Alabama,
Absolutely.
unless
Yep.
they're running at Talladega. Talladega then has some importance. So I knew both of the head coaches very well. Bill Curry was a dear friend of my Uncle Fran, and my Uncle Fran played with Pat Dye at University of Georgia. So I
Yep.
knew both of those guys. So we got away with a lot of stuff that nobody could have dreamt of having happen. And so it was a great time to be there for me. And
Absolutely.
I loved that. But I thought when I moved to Asheville, I really thought I was done. I thought that would be the place that
Really?
I would end up. Big market, it was top 30 market at that time. Asheville, North Carolina is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And the lady that was the news anchor, I had watched her through college, and I was thrilled to get a chance to just meet her. We have a great friendship, and we've stayed in touch over all these years. And it was just, I don't know, everything just magically happened for me.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. It just kind of magically happened. And so I just kept going along with it.
Yeah, Asheville is beautiful. My sister went to college at Mars Hill right there in Asheville, so
Beautiful.
very familiar with the area, and we've loved traveling up there as well. You spent some time doing ESPN sideline reporting as well. Was that before that? Was that while you were?
I was
still
here,
doing stuff?
and so it was 19. I'm going to say it was 1990. The guy that hired me in Chattanooga was working for a production company. They were broadcasting games that were carried all over the place. At that time, it was you could find games on different channels. You could find them on different folks that produced.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that he got me connected was a guy named Dan Shoemaker, who passed away a few years ago. But that was the first time I ever had done a television game, and I was doing the sidelines for the Oyster Bowl, and it was the Citadel against VMI, and they played at the old Foreman Field in Norfolk.
Yep.
Now, the last 3 years, I've been doing play-by-play at Old Dominion, and it's not the same stadium, but it's in the same area.
Yep.
And for me to get a chance to go back is really a full circle from doing sidelines to doing play-by-play. But during that time, I started working with Dan Shoemaker's group, and we did a lot of Southern Conference football, Ohio Valley football. And then I was very, very fortunate and got connected in with doing ABC. They did regional games at that time. And there were some folks that pulled me into the Virginia Tech games, and I did sidelines. And lo and behold, and the next thing I know, I'm doing college football with ABC and getting to work with Brent Musburger. It was pretty good. Drew Brees was a senior at Purdue.
Yep.
Hosting Notre Dame, and they beat Notre Dame for the first time ever. A guy named Dan Fouts. You've probably heard that name before. Dan Fouts was doing color. And the coordinating producer for all of ABC college football, Bob Goodrich, produced that telecast. Now, it didn't get any better. It just didn't.
Yeah.
So that moved into doing some play-by-play for ABC. And then the general manager, who was our station here, was not delighted with the fact that I was doing network.
Yep.
And didn't want me to continue. And I said, well, I'm probably going to continue, and that did not help the situation, but it made it more difficult. So I had to bounce back to do more regional games, and then at that time, it got a little tougher, and it went along 2 or 3 years. And if you fall out of the network thing for a couple of years and you're doing the regional games for them, you usually don't get back to that pinnacle. But what it did do is it opened a lot of doors for us when we were at the Sugar Bowl, when Virginia Tech played Florida State for really was a national championship game.
Yep.
I knew everyone there. Mike Tirico was doing play-by-play. Terry Bowden was doing color. Terry Bowden had been at Samford when I was at Birmingham. He had his own coaches show, and I screamed at him in the set, and I said, why are you coaching? Coaching. There he goes to ABC.
Yeah.
And then the other guy was a guy named Tim Brandt, and I worked a lot of games with Tim Brandt. He did play-by-play, and I was on the sidelines. But I just had so many great memories of that and getting to do network games. I'll give you one quick, and I know I'm going off the board here with this, but this was one of the most amazing things that ever happened. Also, was the hardest thing is, and you may remember this, but Texas and Texas A&M, when they play, if it's at Texas A&M, the students build this gargantuan fire, and
Okay.
it's a huge, stories high. And that year, 12 died.
Oh my goodness.
And so the president of A&M came on live with us in the beginning of the game before we actually went to the first break before we had kickoff. And that was the first time he'd spoken publicly live to anybody. And we had him. And that was an honor to be able to be there. And it was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do was be at that game, because they probably shouldn't have played the game. Mac Brown was a coach at Texas, and another dear friend who really helped me along the way. And years later, he told me that. He said, that was probably not a good decision. A&M won the game, which probably was the best thing at that time for what that school needed, some kind of lift. But being able to do some of those things, it was just, that's where I just kept the bug, and I've never, I love doing the games. Love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Got to travel a lot and see a bunch of different stadiums as well. You touched on the 99-2000 Sugar Bowl with Tech and Florida State. Do you have a favorite memory from that season with Michael Vick? I went to Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
My dad went to Virginia Tech. I grew up a Hokie, so I was 5 when that happened.
Yeah.
But
Thanks, I appreciate that.
but that team means a lot to a lot of Virginia Tech fans and our viewers and whatnot. Do you
Yes.
remember that run and that season? And did you
Yeah.
follow the Hokies a lot? Did you go to all the games? How did kind of the coverage
No.
work back then?
Rick Stose was here with us, and Rick Stose was a Virginia Tech grad. So Rick would go to every home game. I did not get to go to every home game because we were rotating around, and I was still doing games. But I did go to some of the games, not all of them, but some. But that entire experience, just to be there when it was turning over from 99 to 2000, and we were out doing a live shot in the parking lot of the Superdome, and you could hear folks riding by shooting into the top of the dome because it was a glass kind of top. That was probably as scared as I think any of the three of us have ever been, because it was nerve-wracking because we were doing live shots from down there. It felt like we were there a month. That was scary. But the inside, to be around Coach Beamer and Shane, we were giving Shane a hard time at that point because he was a player. He wasn't coaching, he was a player. And that whole experience was awesome. One other little ABC thing out of that, one of the sideline guys, Lynn Swan, who I got to work with a lot of times, was on one sideline, and Jack Arute was on the other. But Jack Arute did not have a voice. 2 days into the game, the day before the game, and I met the president of ABC Sports, who said, Chip, if Jack can't go, you are.
Oh,
we'll
wow.
put you on the Tech sidelines. And he said, but we'll see what happens. But anything you need, we'll take care of it. And we got to do our show before kickoff on the sidelines. We had an hour show before the kickoff of that national championship game. That's never happened before or after. So that was pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah.
We got away with that one because ABC said he's with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good stuff. But Tech had so many opportunities. Had Michael Vick been 100%, I really think they would have won the football game. I really do, and probably will always think that. It was a magical time for Virginia Tech football.
Oh, yeah.
And, Frank Beamer's such a great, great human being. My youngest son was in a car wreck years ago. He was in the back seat, and just one of those things that happened. And I got an unbelievable long voicemail from Coach Beamer that I kept it for years and years and years, and then somehow it disappeared. But it meant so much to me. And he said, you got to bring him up so I can see him. And so we went up and visited him at one point. That's the kind of connections that I loved. And I love to be involved with the coaches and get to know them. And I've always felt like I've known Coach Beamer very well, and I just think the world of him.
You mentioned earlier, you brought up your uncle, obviously, Fran Tarkenton. What has that been like? Growing up and your last name being associated. I'm sure every single time you meet somebody, they bring it up as a joke, and then they've realized that is actually your Hall of Fame uncle quarterback for the Vikings.
It was a unique upbringing, to say the least, because we got to go to some games, and I look more like Fran than my dad. And Fran, over the years, has just started. He said, "Dipper." He always calls me Dipper Dan. Dipper. He said, I'm just going to start introducing you as my oldest son. He said, that's what everybody says. It was a fun upbringing. The crazy part of that is that, we went to games, you got in the Hall of Fame, but he was really just Uncle Fran to us.
Yeah.
And we'd play golf with him in the summers. And I lived with him for a while when I transferred schools, and I moved to Atlanta, and I lived with his family before the fall when I was going to be playing. The only thing that was bad is here he was playing for the Minnesota Vikings, and I go to Atlanta, and I'm playing for the Lakeside Vikings.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't wear 10. I wore 11. But he was always encouraging. He's always been just phenomenal, and he and I, very, very blessed to have a great connection, and we're close. We are really, really close, and have gotten closer probably the last 25 or 30 years too, because we stay in touch. And it's pretty neat to go to some of those games, and pretty neat to be on the field on a Saturday before a Sunday. And we went to Minnesota one year. We were hoping to see snow. It was 65 degrees.
Yeah.
Warmest here in October, late, November. You're going, whoa, hey, we're in Georgia. We wanted to see snow, but like I said, he was really just our uncle. He never made you think he was anything but that. You knew everybody else was trying to get autographs and stuff, but he just never was like that around us. So,
that's a great story. The first thing I didn't realize it. Obviously, I'd heard about your name, especially once I got in here, and then making the connection was pretty interesting. But you spent 23 years here. We talked about kind of the difference between television in 1988 and then 2011. Over that span, what was the biggest change in terms of how you would put your sportscast on every night?
Well, we used to have big tapes that were like this. I'm trying to get into the thing. They're like this big. I mean, squared
like
off
VHS
rectangles, bigger than that to start with. They were 3/4, and they were big. And to edit, it was very slow because it rewind and to edit, and it would take a while. Then we went to the beta tapes, which were much faster, and you could get bigger tapes to put more tape on it. Went to that, and then when near the end, we had gone to some kind of computer stuff that I was never sensational with. We made it work. I worked really hard to try to figure it out. But it was just everything, even on set.
Yeah.
The set was totally different of what you could or could not do. We used to use the weather wall as what we called the chroma key so that you could put stuff behind us when we did our high school football shows in that studio. Much different from what it is now. You had marks on the floor is normal, but you're doing the show and the green wall is the only thing you saw behind you. So that was kind of different too, to see how it's changed. And the beauty of it is I think it's made it better in a lot of ways because you guys can do stuff today. You don't even have to be in the station. You could put a whole show together from anywhere.
Yeah.
You could do a live and a whole show.
It's like even just this video that I was playing earlier, I put that together in 3 minutes before he sat down real quick.
That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have happened. So that's really neat that you could do. It's cool. I mean, it really, I don't understand all of it.
Well, I hear the stories of pasting together tapes.
Yes.
Like that blows my mind to think about that.
I didn't have to do a lot of the tape cutting because that was when they put it on one of the bigger reels. So I never had to cut I made it past that, or I would have cut my hand off or something else probably. But the changes of how much quicker you could get it on the air.
Did you used to have to get your news off of the AP? Well, I don't even know what it was called.
You said it. Yes, the old days you could get stuff off the Associated Press, and also as UPI, United Press International, at one point. When I first started in communications and radio, that's what you always had to use. Television, when we got here, it was a little different. We had one, but we didn't really use it that much. And I think when we moved here, I think we got rid of those machines because I don't remember a lot of those because you could start getting information in other places. But that's changed. Radio's changed. When I was here, K95 was right across the road. The big FM in town, country music, and Catfish had a great morning show. So I made sure to get on the radio with him because the more exposure you had at that time was the best way to get most viewers. So that was one of the things that we tried to do. We also tried to generate shows. We had shows at the Quazoo. I mean, we had shows about shows. When I came in and we did high school football, we had a helicopter. If you can imagine, we would fly that rascal into 4, 5, 6 games.
Would you ever ride in it?
Or every week.
Oh, really?
I went in it every week because I got out and we had Pee Wee footballs. We were sponsored with Pizza Hut.
I was looking for, but anyway, Brian Stith had a big game, Virginia over Richmond by 69-57. That's the footage of the second game between VCU and Old Dominion. Old Dominion turned back VCU by a 77-67 count. That was the guy that was really trouble right there. Chris Gatlin, as he turned in a fine performance, 31-1. All right, another move in Montreal as we turn to baseball action. Hubie Brooks signed a 3-year deal with the LA Dodgers. Brooks joins Kurt Gibson, Cal Daniels, and Juan Samuel in the Dodger outfield.
And we
Carol,
like
when
to
we come
do
back,
shows
Steve Bucci will
more
join
shows
us
you did, the more
live
chance you had to pick up
and
an
direct
audience.
from the Coliseum.
Yeah, my favorite part
He'll have
about
some notes
this
on
job,
that
and ever
second
since
game.
I've been in the business, is high school football. And some of my favorite memories,
Looking forward to it.
we would always watch. I'm from Norfolk, so it was they still use their television, their helicopter. Their show's called Friday Night Flights, I think it is. And I was always enamored by that as a kid. And now that I'm in the business, it's by far my favorite thing to do. We've done a really good job with it here, bringing it back and whatnot. And I just love putting together the Friday Night Football show. And I'm sure that you enjoyed that while you were here as well, all the different high schools and whatnot.
Loved it, because we would go places nobody would go. And that was probably one of the funniest things, is that I would run into the other two guys, around town, and they go, "Really? You went to King William? Really? You went up to the coast? No, you went all the way down to Blackstone? Yes." If it was a good game or a good meeting, we'd load up and go, and folks just shake their heads.
I'm sure you felt like a superhero coming in on the helicopters and landing.
The bigger thing for me was hoping we landed and took off without hitting anything or anybody. That was the biggest thing.
I think I'd be nervous. I really did.
It was. Nottaway used to do a great job of having victuals for us, as they'd call some of them. They'd have, all kind of stuff to eat. They'd have barbecues and all. It was classic. If you flew into Lunenburg Central, you'd get a Charger dog. They always wanted to get you a Charger dog. So some of those were just great to fly into, and you got to know the coaches and a lot of their fans and their players obviously well. And it was fun to do that. And, the NASCAR was fun. That's what everything here was really fun. We had the basketball coaches shows. We had 3 coaches shows in basketball at one time. People go, coaches shows? Yeah.
You were busy, man.
Shows. Busy's an understatement. We ran year round.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was really fun to do all of it.
Oh, yeah.
It really was. I don't regret any of it. We had a blast, but we worked. We really did work at that time, because you had to.
Were you here for VCU's Final Four run? Wasn't that 2011?
Yep, I was here.
So that was one of your last things then.
And it was quite a run. It was staggering. And Paul Nevedomsky is still a photographer here. He and I were in Buffalo, New York. It was the coldest I have ever been in my life. He made us go see the falls. He said, if we're this close to Niagara Falls, we're going to go see it. And we froze for the 30 seconds we were there. But it was pretty cool to watch what took place there. And, that whole time, the basketball was good here. The football was good here. Virginia had played in some big games and could have won a national championship themselves in football. There's Virginia Tech was doing. The basketball was great, like I said. And then you had the Braves moving out and the Squirrels moving in.
Yeah.
And, the Braves had a big stronghold here for so long. And it's good to see that they're building a new facility, because it's definitely time for that to happen. But it's like I said, there wasn't anything that wasn't fun. I mean, we enjoyed all of it. Had a great time with it.
Yeah, I know this is going to be a hard question, because you spent so much time here and you have so many memories. But do you have maybe a favorite or a top 2 when you look back and you think, man, like that was one of my favorite memories of working at Channel 8?
I think, and you were here when we had John's goodbye. And you saw the number of folks that came out for John's farewell.
Oh, yeah.
It was a close-knit group. Even when you left, you stayed in touch. So people would leave and stay in touch. There are people that I still connect with that I met here in 1988. And there are folks, when I left in 2011, I stayed in touch with. And who was here and how hard we had to work, because we were the 3rd place station when I got here all the time. And the Petersburg thing hurt us, because you couldn't be up here all the time. So it made it tougher. Not an excuse, it just was the truth. And then moving here into this building changed everything. And your goal was always to win a book, and that's a ratings book for those that are watching and listening to us. And when we would win that, and it was only a few times, it meant the world, because that's how you were judged as far as for selling ads and for, did you win this ratings book?
Yeah.
And it meant a lot, because I felt like we worked hard, and we a lot of times had the least amount of people and the least resources till we got here. Then we had the good resources. But I think that's what made you work harder and made it more fun when you did have some success. And I loved every minute of it, but it was time to go. I mean, I knew that when the opportunity I went to Owens & Minor, Director of Community Relations, and it was a Fortune 500 company, and it was a big push-up in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I knew I could still do the other stuff, which was broadcasting the games, which is really what I wanted to keep doing. There was no reason not to go. My boys were getting to high school ages, and I was going to miss stuff. In fact, I missed my oldest, I think it was his freshman year, maybe in college, and or maybe in high school. And I couldn't go because we were in a ratings book. It was in February, so I couldn't go to the Friday night. It was out of town because we were in a book. And that's when it really started hitting me, is that I'm going to miss everything my boys are going to do if I'm in here stuck in the ratings book.
Yeah.
And so that kind of really helped push that along too. And I knew it had been hard for my wife trying to do everything that she was having to do. And boy, she's been a trooper. So, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
So, but there's so many memories. I could talk for 3 hours. And nobody wants to hear 3 hours of Chip talking.
I'll end with this because I'm just curious. Obviously, for those that when John retired here earlier this year, you came by. You've come by today. Does it feel weird pulling up to the station? Do all these memories kind of you didn't realize that you had kind of rushed back?
That's a great question, Nolan. Really, really a great question. I've been asked before if I ever miss doing the shows and doing the Monday through Friday and doing the stuff on the weekend. I don't necessarily miss that because I know how much it took. I know it's different now. What I don't feel funny anymore because I've been around enough folks here, and there are enough folks that remember me here to where it's comfortable to come back in the building. I had that same kind of feel because one of my best friends who was here was one of our sales guys, is a GM at Channel 6. I don't ever have any problem over there. And the GM at 12 has become a great friend as well. So I've been lucky with that because a lot of people never, ever come back in to any television station, whereas I feel pretty comfortable coming in. And I feel like there are enough people here that would vouch for me, and I wouldn't have to put my hands up against the wall and get frisky when coming in the building. But it's still a great place, and I don't think that television will ever leave me, even though we stream all the games that were broadcasted. And that's where I see television continuing to go like this: podcast, streaming. You're streaming everything anyway.
Yeah,
that's the other big change is. I'm broadcasting a game, and I can look in the stands, and I can see 4 or 5 different guys, and they're all holding up this. They'll see the play, and then what do? They look down, and they all got a different game on. So you got 5 games going at once, or 6, and you go, wow, the power this has.
Yeah, really.
It's staggering, and I would have never thought that would happen. Because remember, you're doing a network game. ABC was really the only one doing many network games. We had 5 crews. That was it.
Yeah. Now every single game's broadcast.
Every game's on, which is great.
Even like most high school games, you can find a broadcast of it somewhere.
Interesting you mentioned that. My high school, I've talked about at Lakeside, they are going to try to do that this fall, and they've asked me if I'll come down and do a game. And I'll have to wait and see if that can work. I don't know. Not sure that's something they're going to want me to do, but it could be kind of fun, really kind of fun to do that. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well, Fran, I called you Fran.
It's okay. I've been called that before. It's okay. It won't hurt my
Thanks so much for stopping by. Is there, how can our viewers maybe, stay in touch with you? Do you have a social media tag or something?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. When Facebook came out and they had us do that here, I'm to the 5,000 max. Somehow I don't know how to change it to make it more, but so it's hard to get me on that, but I'm on everything else too. I'm on X, and I'm on Twitter, and whatever else there is out there. I'm on all of those. So I've stayed active.
Well, I really appreciate you stopping by. I think this is gonna be a special treat for our longtime viewers that have been keeping stuck with the station for a while.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it because that doesn't always happen. The young guys come in, and you don't want to be around the old guys, so to speak. And it happened when I was younger. You didn't know if it was a great idea. You'd think, oh my gosh, I don't know. But you've been awfully nice, and you're doing a great job. You really are doing a great job, and wish you guys continued success.
Yeah, we've. how it was. There was a period of time of here where there wasn't sports. And so for us to bring it back, and the reception that we've gotten from our viewers about bringing sports back, and it's been so much fun to kind of get back into it. And I'm on sidelines all the times, and people will say, we're so happy Channel 8 has sports back, which I'm sure, with, how much of an audience you built with the sports department back in the day, I'm sure some of those people have stuck around. And for now that we have it sports back, I feel like we have a connection and a tie to, kind of represent Channel 8 sports well. So,
we were lucky. We had great people. Greg Screws, who was here, Dawn Davenport, who I managed to get her to come here. Has been with ESPN over 10 years now, and she's doing great things. So we had a lot of wonderful people that I stay in touch with and think the world of, and I think that matters. I just always do, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, well, that's going to wrap things up for Chip Tarkenton. Thanks so much again. This has been Nolan Knight. We'll see you next week with another very special edition of the show. Some big news coming next week, so be sure to tune in to find out what's going on with the 8 Sports team, because things are moving. We'll say that much. Until then, though, we'll see you next time. Have a good night.